A jawbone nearby looks like it belongs to the same individual.
This material, at least that skull, has not moved a very long way. That is, that mandible, if that is her mandible, and I think there's the same wear state, everything looks right, was attached to that skull.
A closer examination of the skull yields a surprise.
What I've just discovered is this little piece of bone that's sitting right on this individual's forehead, literally against it, is in fact that of a neonate. It's a child that may not even be born yet.
The remains of part of the baby's upper jawbone, the maxilla, and some of the face are fused against the forehead of the adult skull. Could this be a mother who died in childbirth? The find, combined with the range of ages and sheer number of bones here, suggests this cave could have been home to an entire community.
Those were real, live people with family, friends, cultures. Maybe it's the fact that there are so very, very many bodies here. I'm almost touched more than any other site I've ever worked at. Homo erectus, maybe 750 to 850 cubic centimeters.
Measurements of the skulls show that whoever these people were, they weren't just small. They're some of the smallest humans ever found. Modern adult humans have an average height of around 1.7 meters. Based on the team's estimates, these people would have stood just over 1 meter tall, 1.2 at the most. That's roughly the height of a 5-year-old child today, and similar in size to our ancient ancestors.
Early hominins, such as the famous Lucy, who lived over 3 million years ago, were short. Okay, Lucy was less than 3.5 feet tall.
These bones don't appear to be quite that old, but the small size does make it seem likely that they go back at least 10,000 years. If that's the case, there's a problem. Even with the movement of continents and changing sea levels, the islands of Palau have never been closer than 800 kilometers to the nearest major landmass. With evidence of ocean-going boats only going back 3,000 years, how could these cave people have made the epic journey to Palau? Most scientists believe that our ancestors came from Africa in the form of Homo sapiens, an upright walking species. About 60,000 years ago, they started to move, first venturing into the Middle East, then west to Europe, and through Asia to Australasia. But with Palau being so isolated, the chances of anyone getting here without an ocean-going vessel seem very remote. It's a baffling question with no clear explanation. Until now, scientists believe the first humans to step foot on these islands traveled east from Indonesia 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, a monumental voyage across treacherous seas. If these are the bones of an ancient people, this would suggest that the first settlers arrived here much earlier. But in an era without ocean-going boats, and when most humans were living in rudimentary huts and had only basic tools, it seems unlikely anyone could have survived for days, even weeks at sea with no protection from the elements and no way of preserving food. As the excavation continues, the team makes yet another critical discovery.
Hey, where was it?
Teeth.
No, it's premolar.
Teeth are vital in a number of ways. They can give clues to diet and health.
That's a spectacular
Also,
find.
the hard enamel may have protected the DNA, comparing this to the genetic material of people from neighboring continents could help establish where these people came from.
We're not going to touch this without gloves on because these teeth probably haven't been handled by humans before. So these roots are one of the best places to get DNA from.
There's something unusual about these teeth. Given the small size of the skulls, the teeth are bigger than they should be.
That's a spectacular find. A big tooth.
They are close in size to the teeth of modern humans.
While they're within modern human variation, they're right at the upper extreme. They're huge.
Figuring out what these people look like is shaping up to be an even bigger challenge than previously thought.
No, no.
Human paleontologist Steve Churchill finds an important piece of the puzzle.
The question is...
Voila. Steve.
Bada bing.
Steve wins.
Bada bing.
There's the face, finally.
It's a fragment of brow ridge that looks like it fits with the section of skull first found by Lee several weeks earlier. The team are slowly collecting the evidence that will show them how these people might have looked. But to unlock the secrets of who these people were and how they lived, they're going to have to dig a lot deeper. The team take the bones to the National Museum on the main island of Koror, where they set up a makeshift lab. The fossils are similar to those of ancient humans, but more sophisticated tests are necessary to determine how old they actually are. Detailed analysis will take place in a few weeks' time, with samples being sent to laboratories around the world. But for now, Prithajit Chatrath begins to cast and log the fossils. Finally, the appearance of the cave's inhabitants is starting to take shape. But instead of solving the mystery, this only deepens it.
This is not real.
They look unlike any previously known human species, including the Flores hobbits. This creature, with its small, compact body, wide nose and narrow eyes, would have looked almost freakish. Human paleontologist Steve Churchill and Prithajit are puzzled by the new fragment that helped complete the top of the face. The bone from one side looks much heavier than the other, and Lee knows that that could be a problem.
Hey guys, I hear our little piece didn't fit.
The thick brow that made Lee believe he had found an ancient skull may not be what it seems.
Is it possible that that's actually covered with calcrete? It is possible that there's calcrete on that.
What looked like a pronounced brow ridge is actually a deposit of calcrete, a hard substance formed over hundreds of years by minerals and rainwater.
That is calcrete.
Once the calcrete is removed, the skull suddenly looks much more modern. At first, this seems like bad news.
Monumentally disappointing.
But in fact, the possibility of the fossils being modern could open the door to an even more astonishing possibility. After 3 days in the lab, Berger and his team are starting to believe that these bones are not the remains of an ancient people at all, but a tribe of previously unknown tiny humans that lived in modern times. This would be the first evidence of such an evolutionary diverse people living alongside modern humans in recent times. The team won't know for sure until samples have been carbon dated, but they're beginning to suspect that these unusual-looking cave people could have populated the island just 3,000 years ago, possibly surviving until as recently as 500 AD. Humans from other regions at this period stood at nearly the same height as us, with modern features such as pronounced chins and large brains. So who were these tiny people, and why did they evolve so differently from us? Scientists can only speculate, but the what-ifs are extraordinary. Did these cave people resemble us in height and appearance, but somehow grew smaller in order to adapt to a difficult environment? Or were they small when they arrived? Perhaps the answer is as simple as there wasn't enough food. With no crops or animals on the island, these people would have relied on what they could fish or scavenge. Their bodies and brain cavities shrinking due to a lack of protein and other basic nutrients.
With harsh conditions, when you need to grow as many individuals as possible from a limited number of calories, it would be adaptive to have each of those individuals need fewer calories. And one way to do that is to become smaller.
Halfway through the week-long expedition, the team still has a problem. The remains could be those of children, not tiny adults. The answer lies in the teeth. The third molar, or wisdom tooth, is found in most adults. It erupts after puberty. Until then, it stays lodged inside the jawbone. The absence of a third molar in all three jawbones they've discovered would be further proof that these tiny faces belong to fully fledged adults. Lee calls on the services of the local hospital to re-examine the bones and hopefully confirm his theory. The result comes as a huge relief.
And because it was so small, we said,
It's got to be a child.
it's got to be a child. But if it were a child,
You'll see it.
there should be a third molar right there. And there's not.
The jawbones prove it. These tiny people were full-grown adults, not children. But there's still the question of why those teeth are so big in relation to the small skull. In humans, teeth evolve much more slowly than the rest of the body. It could be that as the islanders' bodies shrank drastically from one generation to the next, their teeth simply didn't have time to catch up.
In evolutionary terms, teeth are very slow to change. And that's probably why the teeth look big in the Palauan sample. They're actually still normal human size. They just haven't caught up with the tiny Palauan bodies yet.
So what if these small people were once full-sized? Evidence shows that the earliest settlers arrived in Palau just 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Subsequent generations might have adapted to the harsh conditions, but it seems to have happened very quickly. This would mean that rather than humans evolving over tens of thousands of years, as previously thought, these little people could have changed drastically in size and shape in just a few hundred years. Experts say it's a rate of change that would have been considered impossible until now.
If size and shape have changed in a human population over a few hundred years, we would have to start to rethink what we understand about the processes of evolutionary change as they apply to modern humans.
4 days into their quest, and each bone fragment brings these tiny people more fully to life. But the scientists are struggling to keep up. The number and range of bones here is greater than anyone imagined. and that in itself is a mystery. With its collection of fossilized bodies, some largely intact and not widely scattered, the cave is looking less like a dwelling and more like a mausoleum, a mass burial site, a cemetery. And yet, Lee suspects that these are no ordinary graves.
A cemetery population is just this. What you would expect to dig up if you dug up a cemetery regarding age ranges. And what will we expect? Well, you're going to see lots of very young people and lots of very old people and very few people in the middle if the population is normal. When you